Okay, we're recording. Thank you everyone for joining today's SMAX User Group. My name's Dean Clayton. I am one of the product managers for SMAX. And in today's session, we're going to look at AI-enriched workflows with Aviator. Just to give a quick overview of the plans for today. So we're going to do a little bit of news and patch announcements. Then I'll go through the main brunt of my session. We'll do a quick overview of Aviator for SMAX. We'll look at some AI-enriched workflows and actually dive into them and how they were built with some demos. And then we'll come up for a wrap-up where we'll kind of let you know what's happening as we go forward with the SMAX User Group. So that's that little announcement piece that we mentioned in the invite. So as always with the SMAX user groups, these are currently a bi-weekly meetings for technical practitioners to learn more about what we do with the product. Obviously the calendar is available at, you can use the short URL tiny.cc SMAX UG topic. That is obviously on our community forum where all the previous recordings are. And you can use the SMAX. If you're here, you've probably already registered unless someone's forwarded you an invite, but you can register for upcoming events, upcoming sessions as part of the tiny.cc SMAX UG short link as well. And that's currently on WebEx, but we'll talk more about that later on. We tend to break these down into three types. So we have office hours, which are kind of open sessions for asking questions, and we'll try and help you out with any queries you've got. We do our quarterly release readiness updates as well, where we'll give you details on what's happening in the latest release. And then we do sessions like today, where it's a bit of a feature spotlight, where we do a deep dive on a specific capability, maybe share some best practice, some demos, tips, how to configure, that kind of thing. So really pleased to be able to do a feature spotlight today. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Okay, before we get into the cool stuff, just a little bit of a notice about our latest patch releases. For those of you running 24.1, or technically we're originally on 23.4 and then upgraded to 24.1, we are currently on patch 2. So it's 24.1 P2. That comes with a number of fixes, but please obviously be aware of those previous updates and any post-admin tasks that are required, post-upgrade tasks that are required, and obviously all the information about that is available from the doc site. For 24.2 customers, we have obviously released 24.3, and as we have stated in the past, 24.3 is part of that patch release schedule, so technically it's the equivalent of the third patch for 24.2, and that would also mean that the next patch that we release would be 24.3.1. So if you are upgraded to 24.2, it's very much expected you should be deploying 24.3 release, and which should be nice and simple for you with no major update, no major problems with performing that upgrade. As part of that, there's a number of enhancements with those odd numbered releases. We do tend to include a few number of enhancements. So it's 5 for SMAX, we've got 5 for Aviator, and obviously the content pack stuff that we've done for UCMDB. A large number of fixes as well are included in that. And if you want to see details, there's the 24.3 release readiness video recording, which you can get from the user group community, or you can go read the patch notes and the notes on our documentation page as well. And just as a reminder for our SaaS customers, we've started to roll out 24.3 to the SaaS farms. Please refer to your PCS notifications or check the service health page for your farm to have details on when the maintenance window is planned for the rollout of 24.3 to you. All right, okay, so that's all those notices. Let's get on with the main show today. So I'm doing a bit of as obviously part of my responsibility in the SMAX team, I look after Aviator, and I thought it would be a good opportunity today to go through and give a quick update on what capabilities we have with Aviator, in case maybe you've not heard of what we've done, but also then do a deep dive into AI-enriched workflows, which I think is where the majority of us are going to have the most fun, should we say, but see the real power of bringing Gen AI into your service management solution. So quick high-level view, as we talked about in the past, our Aviator service is currently a hosted service on OpenText SaaS. So you can connect to it either if you are a SMAX SaaS customer or if you are an on-prem customer. We have the same pricing irrespective. The licensing is exactly the same. Configuration is slightly different. There's a few extra steps for on-premise customers. But the way that Aviator works is obviously it's providing a number of services, primarily a large language model as part of that stack. But there's a lot of other things that we do, including managing some multilingual. We have a vectorized index and database set up in there as well. And from a point of view of your system, your knowledge content that is indexed into IDLE is shared into the Aviator service to allow fast retrieval when communicating with Aviator. That allows us to respond back and give obviously that summarization of your knowledge or help out in other ways from an agent perspective in them working on tickets. But it's only knowledge data that is synchronized across, and that can obviously be knowledge articles within SMAX and any external content that's brought across as well. And just as a note here about our multilingual support, because I've had a few customers reach out to me and ask about it. We currently support those languages you see there. So the main language of French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Turkish. But that does include regional variants as well. So Swiss German, French Canadian, Brazilian Portuguese. And we're planning, and that multilingual support is pretty much everywhere where you're working with the Aviator service. It will be utilized because it kind of sits sort of in front of at the beginning of the Aviator service and does a check on what data is sent to it to identify the language as part of that. And we are planning additional languages. We are actually planning as part of our next release to add a few more languages. But on top of that, we can pretty much add in any language. It's really just based on customer demand. And the way that we're doing it is extra service that we run within the stack. So eventually over time, large language models that we use in the stack will probably be able to handle all of the language requirements, but we're supplementing that with additional services to make sure customers can get the best out of Gen AI today. All right, so quickly, just to cover the use cases. So for business users, so we typically see this as people interacting on the portal or via the mobile app or on MS Teams. It can obviously respond to your queries, provide a summary based on existing knowledge to help self-solve. So, and as part of that, it can obviously also suggest next steps. When we talk about existing knowledge, and this is always something that I like to make sure people understand, is that's based on the content you have within your system and within your SMAX system. So that's knowledge articles, news, service catalog, descriptions, or externally indexed content. Okay, so if you've got a connector that's pulling data from OpenText core content, or maybe SharePoint, Confluence, or maybe you're indexing, crawling a website of some sort, maybe an intranet site, to pull into your data set within SMAX and be available via the global search in SMAX, that is all available for Aviator to respond. Now, Aviator as a large language model does have some inherent knowledge, but we have an option which we call open topics, which allows you to turn that on or off. We typically recommend turning that off, especially for business users, because whilst that may be useful for helping you come up with a recipe for spaghetti meatballs, it may not be so good in a business context where you want more accuracy for your business users. And of course, there's the ability to manage feedback as well, so you can thumbs up, thumbs down, any response that you get. And as an admin, you'll be able to look at that data and respond on it appropriately. For agents, we have our embedded widget, as you can see there in the little screenshot. That provides the same chat conversation as the end users. The only difference would be that in theory, it's not going to give the ability to create a ticket like a service from the service catalog, and any links in there will go to the actual knowledge article itself on the agent interface. but it does obviously have all the other controls that you have there. We also have a number of additional Aviator action buttons as well, so you can see those in the screenshot, where we have the ability to summarize a ticket or even potentially suggest a solution. Now, currently that only working on requests and incident, and the suggest solutions is obviously based on knowledge content that's in the system. That is something that we are planning to solve fairly soon as part of our overall roadmap. And of course, final thing that we've got is with our latest 24.3 release, we added an embedded conversation history. So anytime you can save your chats, you can have up to about 20 of those saved and have them stored if you need to come back to them at any point. And they're only visible to the individual user themselves. No one else can see that conversation history. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of an overview currently what we've got. I'm now going to go and start talking about AI enriched workflows, and I'm going to go into a bit of detail on this. If there's any questions that you want to ask as I go through this, likewise with what I've talked about Aviator, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and myself and Brindusa will pick them up as we go through. As I say this and about to go to the next session, I'll just double check to make sure we've got no questions that have come through. I don't think we have. Nope. Looks like we're all right. Just double check chat. Nope. We're okay at the moment. Okay, so let's get started on the cool stuff. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is Aviator models and what are they? So Aviator models is a new record entity type that exists within SMAX. It's under the should we say AI settings, or currently what's labeled as AI settings within SMAX, and this is how you utilize or interact with the Aviator service. So some people might turn around and say, isn't that just prompt engineering? Well, it is, but a little bit more. And that's because that's only just one of the configuration items you got there. As you can see from the screenshot, there is a prompt template where you can kind of define an overall prompt that gets there, but there's a number of other fields and settings that you can configure per template that you set up in the system. And just to be aware, you'll only see Aviator models in a SMAX system if you've got the Aviator capability enabled. So you've activated a subscription to the Aviator service, and if you've got appropriate permissions to the Aviator model record entity. So in other words, pretty much a tenant admin, but it can be allocated out to other users as well. So if we look at those different settings, what are they? What do they do? So your prompt template, as we said, is very much that prompt engineering type aspect. This allows you to write the query, or should we say the wrapper of a query that is potentially going to go to Aviator service to get the response back. Okay, there's a couple of parameters that we currently provide as part of this. It's something we're actually going to be looking to extend with our next release. But you've got an input, so that's any kind of user input that is provided as part of the prompt. So if we think about this, where you're typing a chat in the embedded widget on the agent side, okay, that input would be whatever you've typed there. And then, of course, you've got context as well. And this is all about what information may have been provided if you've done some kind of either search against the vector database, or maybe bringing some information from within SMAX as well. And make a little bit more sense as we go forward. Now, the prompt template only really supports English. We have seen a few people play around and put other languages in there, and in principle, it can sort of work, but our recommendation is for your prompt template to be in English to avoid any problems utilizing your Aviator models. The next one that we've got on there, the arrow is slightly low there, is max new tokens, and this is to do with how much Aviator responds back with, how many words Aviator responds back with. So if you think about a token, it's should we say part of a word, right? It's part of how large language models work, where they break words down into slightly smaller chunks. I think there's a general viewpoint that each token is about 0.6 or 2/3 of a word, roughly, in terms of how it's defined. But this basically is every time you send data to Aviator, that's obviously there's a number of tokens that are included. So all that text that's in the prompt template there, plus what's been typed into the chat, okay, are sent to Aviator. And then the response that you get back from Aviator would include however many new tokens that you set there. Now, if you set that quite low and say like to a smaller number, then what would, or the response out of the large language model is greater than whatever's been specified, then you'll see a continue generation message in your chat. So something some people probably have seen where they've got like a fairly lengthy response back and there's a continue generation. And all that means it's just going to do another loop around the system to provide the extra answer. And one of the reasons why you typically want to keep this number low is it helps with the overall speed of how much it can return back and how fast it can return the response. Next setting that we've got is context source. So this is all about how we interact with additional data. So there's two options here currently, vector database or applications. So vector database is I want to go and do a search across the vector database, provide and have that as part of the data that's sent to the large language model to provide the response back. And then of course we now have applications, which is to be honest, where you're going to be using it with Aviator business rules and AI enriched workflows, where you're potentially going to provide some additional data or context from the record that you're calling Aviator from. All right. And if you have a look in the out of the box system, you'll see that there's a number of things already set up that kind of talks about this. Then we have max references. So this is how many references a search and return as part of that vector database. So it's only available if you are setting it to a context source or vector database. You can have between 1 and 10. And this also then potentially will come into the results that are returned back to a user as well. So if you think about this, it's like you were doing a global search in SMAX. Think about how many references would be returned back, how many entries in the global search would come back. If you got a lower number, obviously that means you're anticipating to be more accurate within the first couple that a user responds back on. Whereas if you choose a larger number, that may increase the amount of potential options that are suggested, but also that can have a potential impact on the accuracy in how the LLM responds back to you. If we then look at open topics, as I mentioned earlier, this is the ability to utilize the inherent knowledge or what training data that the large language model has been built with to help with providing answers. This can obviously have an impact on hallucinations, which is why I mentioned about the recommendation to not necessarily use that with your end users, with your business users, and on the portal. But dependent on where you're using it, it can actually be really useful for helping out with some of the wider queries you might want to ask. And I think if I look at it from an agent perspective, utilizing the chat widget as an agent, I think there's a benefit of utilizing that because it may have some training in there related to the topic that I may be looking for to try and get an answer. You know, maybe it's got some information about some of the services that you provide. But also, as we start to improve and change the actual underlying large language model, look, for example, we're planning to make that change in our next release. That quality, the inherent knowledge it's got, is going to improve significantly in how it responds. All right. So again, it's an option you can use. You can turn it on or you can turn it off. And then finally, similarity threshold. Again, this is only available when you're using with a vector database, but it can it helps define when it's doing that search, what it should be using for the overall similarity threshold between the text that's entered and what comes back as part of the vector database. All right. So default values out of the box, we recommend going forward is 0.82 as a starting point. We did actually change this, as well. I've got the note on here, when we moved to 24.3. So prior to 24.3, we used a different model, which was up to numbers up to 0.5. So a lot of our settings in the out of the box are, I think, 0.43. So there is a little manual change for anyone that's upgrading or enabling Aviator with 24.3. But as with our 24.4 release, it will be set as that default value. But again, it's one of those areas where you can set that and modify it yourself. We've certainly seen with some customers and some testing and training that we've done that setting this to 0.83, 0.84 can have a great impact and more accuracy based on the queries. But of course, that accuracy normally results in lower number of potential results coming back. So it's all about getting the right balance there. Okay. So that's Aviator models. And the other part that we need when we're talking about AI enriched workflows are business rules. All right. So Aviator business rules are the ability to call the Aviator service and populate a field with appropriate results. Okay. This allows you, so the idea is with that new business rule, okay, you typically set an appropriate Aviator model. So you define an appropriate Aviator model, you set the fields you're going to update, and then you can add some optional additional input as part of the prompt template. So we allow you to do that within the business rule, but you can also provide some context, so additional fields that are within the system as well. Now, Aviator business rules that are in the setup are able to be run currently as after applying changes. So this is when obviously within the record entities workflow. So that's any record entity in SMAX. Okay, so you can run this on your studio apps just as much as you can run this on request or change or incident. And it's also available within a task plan as well. So there's under the choose a new set of business rule, an automated task plan, you have that option in there as well. And the good news is because of the way that we do this, this also works with custom actions as well, which is really quite useful. And in fact, we'll show an example of that with one of the things that we're going to do in a moment. So I'll put some example use cases in here, ticket creation, risk analysis, improving communication, ticket updates, that kind of thing. And we're going to go through a few and show you how, show you a demo of it, and then we're going to show you how we built it as well. I've grabbed some number screenshots so we can walk that one through. Now, one thing that you can't do right now is search across multiple tickets, similar to the way at the moment with the Aviator in general, it doesn't have the ability to, should we say, look across the incident or the other incidents or problem records to provide an answer. But that is part of our overall plans, and actually planned may see it in our next release later this year. But I don't want to steal the thunder of our next set of release readiness calls. Finally, and this is kind of just as a general point that I wanted to make, and hopefully with today's session, it might spark some ideas. But think of this as the ability to do studio apps with Gen AI, right? Think of how you could potentially utilize these to expand on and be really creative within your solution. All right, we'll go through the examples and then we'll go from there. I can see there's a question in the Q&A panel, so I'll just quickly answer that one before we move on. So the question that came in was, how will already created intents collaborate with Aviator once the capability is enabled? Okay, it's a good question. So obviously intents are what we've had with our existing virtual agent capability that we have within SMAX. And then they're there and available in relation to the end user portal. In fact, Aviator is aware of the intent. So when it does and potentially comes back with results, anything you've got set up where you've created intents within the virtual agent settings, they are picked up as well. So that can be quite useful to help, should we say, streamline which are the appropriate knowledge, appropriate service catalog offerings to provide for next steps. So one of the things we do plan to look at as a longer term is maybe looking at how we can kind of fine tune some of the things that we do around intents and the way that could potentially utilize with some other ideas that we're looking at around, should we say, agent-based AI capabilities, or what we tend to call function calling. So being able to trigger an action automatically. But again, that's all part of our longer term plans. All right, so hopefully that helped answer your question. So let's move forward and let's have a look at some of our examples. So I'm going to cover sentiment analysis first. So let me see this one works. So in this first example, okay, we've got a couple of stages that we're going to go through on this one, right? So the first thing is we're going to use Aviator workflow business rules to detect the sentiment on a case. So anytime someone posts an update on a request, we're going to identify whether they're neutral in their message, whether they're positive, whether it's a negative statement. Okay, as you can see in that kind of screenshot there, being frustrated, resulting in it being set in a negative statement. And then that itself allows you to drive further workflow. So as we go through the demo, you'll see we kind of shift that across to potentially trigger an escalation on the ticket. Let's walk it through and then we'll show you how it's built. All right. So we'll go through a very simple process. We'll create a ticket. All right. How do I log into the VPN? Yep. Okay. We're just going to submit that. So very neutral in the way that our text is there. Let's quickly jump across to the agent interface and have a look at that in the thing. Now you can see here we've got a column called sentiment analysis, and what we've done is we've populated that with saying the sentiment is neutral. All right, so look to that description, nothing overly magic there. We're gonna treat it as a neutral sentiment. So let's move forward to the next demo. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to do an update to that ticket, and we're going to be a little bit more, should we say, negative. All right, as is always the way with customers, right? Ticket's been open for two minutes. They're desperate to get it fixed, so they start chasing the ticket straight away. So in this case, David, he's decided that he's frustrated and he's looking for a fix. And what we've done for this demo purposes is when we refresh the ticket, we've picked up that update from the user and we've identified the sentiment analysis as being negative. All right, so we now marked it as a negative, and we've then put some extra workflow in, so maybe some business rules in the workflow to escalate that ticket. All right, now I'll be honest, I don't think that's the kind of thing you're going to want to do, should we say, in your production environments, right? You're not necessarily going to want to escalate every ticket, especially if it's a slightly negative response. Maybe we want to change behaviors of our users, and every time they put a good comment in there, we treat them special and we escalate those tickets instead. But let's walk through how we built that. All right, so there's a couple of steps. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create an Aviator model. All right, so we created a sentiment analysis Aviator model, and you see here we've just got it sentiment analysis. Our prompt template, you can see it's fairly straightforward. Analyze the sentiment in the text inside the ref tags or the references. So we've got that within the prompt template, and provide a single word answer based on this setup. So in other words, if the sentiment is happy, answer with positive, negative, neutral. Also, thing to note, what I quite like is actually generative AI is quite nice when you make mistakes. I don't know if you notice here, but I spelled answer incorrectly on the first line there, and it still actually comes back with the right answer. So after creating that Aviator model, and we saved it and made it active, next thing to do was we need to create a field on the request record to store that information. So we create a new sentiment analysis field, just treat it as a small text field, nothing major there. And then we started to create our business rules. All right, so in this case, we've added a new Aviator business rule to set the sentiment analysis. So this is the structure of the latest business rule. Okay, just so you know, for in the system that we were playing this in, I've used the description option on our business rules to add Aviator as a tag, so it can help me scan through when we're working on different examples to share with you. So in this case, we basically said if the sentiment analysis is equal to null, or the update description is changed, or the current update and comments is changed, okay, set the sentiment analysis. So set that field that we created by calling Aviator based on sentiment analysis. So that's just an input text that we've got in there. We put in as an optional text. We then pass in title, description, and the comments. Okay, so that's going with the prompt to Aviator as part of that loop around. And then using the sentiment analysis Aviator model that we specified in the previous step. All right, fairly straightforward, nothing overly strenuous there. All right, and then in regards to that escalation piece, this is what we put in the system. So we put a couple of things in where we said, when the system's negative, escalate the ticket. So we just put a couple of different rules in, one based on whether the service desk group was null, or one where it was decided to escalate it to a specific person in a different mode. All right, but really straightforward, nothing huge for you to do. Something can be done very quickly. As you say, this is probably when we first put this together, the actual prompt and everything else, it was less than an hour's work, and we probably just spent a little bit of time just fine tuning that prompt to make sure we got the output exactly how we wanted it. So I hope that gives you an idea of a fairly simple way of maybe using generative AI that you haven't seen before. All right, let's go to our next option. Okay, and we're going to look at knowledge article creation. All right, so we'll run through the demo on this one, but in principle, what we're doing in this case is we're going to say, okay, we've got a incident record. It's reached, it's been closed or resolved, or it's going to a resolved state, and it's been marked as a knowledge candidate. And what we're going to do is, rather than that being a manual process that would typically involve a knowledge management or a content administrator type person to go and create a knowledge article, refine the content, is we're going to get Aviator to generate that knowledge article for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that input that's come from the ticket, and we're going to automatically create the knowledge article content that it only needs to be published or reviewed, final review, before it needs to be published for general consumption. Right, something that makes a huge productivity gain and helps the overall knowledge management process. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so let's create an incident ticket. So we just got a nice, basic, simple one in the system. We'll take that as the screenshots before about having issues with login issues, and we'll put a description in there as well. It's very straightforward. You'll be able to log in to the VPN. And we'll set a couple of fields as part of it. We'll set our category. Yeah, let's do that one. We'll set our service, utilizing our, obviously, predictive AI to suggest solutions in there. And in this case, we decided we're going to put it as a major incident as well. Might as well. All right, ticket created. And let's update that resolution. All right, let's put a simple resolution in there. There's no other updates we've got on the ticket, but we could add them if we wanted to. All right, and we're just going to say it's caused by the old VPN software and to uninstall. Now, on saving that record, we've automatically gone and created this knowledge article. And you can see it's in a draft state as well in this particular case. And the information that's appeared on here has all come from utilizing the Aviator service to come out and generate and set everything else up. So created the title as one particular thing, and then it's created a problem and a solution style article for you to then tidy up and then present to your end, make it available to your end users. All right, I hope that was quite useful, gave you a good idea. So how do we build that one? So it's a little bit longer setup on this one, but just only a couple of extra steps. So the first thing that we've done is we've built out our Aviator model. Okay, so again, we've created a knowledge content Aviator model, all right, which is creating the knowledge article itself. All right, and as you can see from that prompt template, generate a knowledge article body with a guide for users to resolve the problem themselves based on the context that we pass as part of whatever we do with the Aviator model. We then put an expected format of the way that we want to do it. So problem and a solution with the appropriate steps that are needed as part of it. Fairly straightforward. We set max tokens. You'll notice we haven't set open topic on there either, just the way that we set that one up. Next thing that we did is we created the knowledge article title. So because we wanted to make me come up with appropriate suggestions for the article title as well, we decided we'd do this as a separate Aviator call, right? As a secondary call to populate that. Because bear in mind, Aviator business rules can only populate one field, right? Now, there's other ways that we could have handled it, but this felt like a nice, simple way to do this. So again, with this one, we use the content of the ref tags as our knowledge, and then ask it to generate a how-to style article title in no more than 20 words. All right. Now you'll notice I got without quotation there, and in the demo we had quote marks, and that's just because of the way that we were playing around with the prompt template, and we forgot to re-record it without the quotes. You'll also notice here the max new tokens. We've left it at 384, which was the default value that we put in there. But because obviously we would want less response, you could actually lower that down to a lower value, more aligned with the output length of 20 or 30 words in there. But again, it really depends on the use case whether you want to reduce the max tokens. Next, we've got to do the usual kind of studio setup. All right. So in this case, we're going to create a new draft field on the knowledge article. So in this case, we called it article draft new. We also decided with the way that we set this one up that we were going to create a new phase within the Aviator workflow. Now, this was because what we wanted to do was not all cases we're going to go through this process of having Aviator do it. We wanted to kind of put a bit of control over it from stopping other, should we say, articles being created. So, and treat that as more of an automated process. This also meant because we're doing the after applying changes, we can move it to the phase and then trigger the rule to automatically, after applying changes, for us to trigger the Aviator rule in the system. Then we created the business rule for the article content. So this, if you look at the way this rule is written, it's basically saying on the knowledge article, if the entity phase equals Aviator draft and the content's not null, then take the plain text version of that content. So make sure to strip out any HTML and then include that as part of it. And then we set that content. So we set the content field on the knowledge article based on the entity title. So we take the entity title from the record and also the Aviator draft content, and we use that generate how to article Aviator model. We also did another one to do and update the title as well. So you see exactly the same kind of setup, but in this case, we're setting the title of the record as part of it as well. Now, this is where we kind of get into that classic kind of creating other records from records that we would normally do within SMAX. It's not just an Aviator thing, it's just a standard create new record with relationship. And in this case, what we've done is we've built out a, based on when the entity solution is not null and the knowledge candidate value is changed and is marked as true, okay, that we would trigger creating an article based on the incident. Okay, so create a new knowledge article and copying that data across. So we're copying across the content that we're putting into the draft new, and you can see the concatenation that we've used there to pull the data together. All right, we've set the content to Aviator as part of our trigger for going to the Aviator phase. We're setting the title based on the display label of the incident as a starting point. Setting the subtitles article, and you can see also we're setting the phase ID to Aviator draft. So bypassing the normal setup, but that's allowing us to then trigger our Aviator business rules and make it and populate all that data. All right, hope that was useful. I think looks like there was some conversation in the chat. Let me just quickly have a look. So, question from, are the demos being shown on Aviator going to be available out of the box to be customized, or will they need to be recreated as shown? Good question. Today, you could follow the instructions we're doing in this session to recreate it yourself. There's no problem with doing that and modify it how you feel. Part of our plans with the next couple of updates, certainly with 24.4, is we're hoping to make these use cases available out of the box for you to then modify as you need. The way that we're approaching the Aviator setup is we want to give you full flexibility, so there's nothing that's locked. You can go and modify it to fit and suit your needs. Of course, that does mean to say you need to have purchased Aviator to make them available. And secondly, there probably will be a couple of things you need to do as a step. So, for example, enabling the business rules. Okay, the fields will probably be created for you. The Aviator models will exist, but you'll probably need to enable the actual rules themselves in the system. But we'll have that as part of the, should we say, upgrade steps or the update steps for the new release. Okay, hope that answers the question, Kevin. Okay, so let's look at my last example for today, and we're going to look at change risk analysis. Now, this one's a little bit more complex. But really it's because we're just doing we're doing a couple of Aviator business rules, but we're adding in an extra step of having this all launch from a custom action. All right. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is doing a detailed change risk analysis report based on some of the criteria within the change record. Okay, so we're going to take the description, the affected services, planned downtime duration, urgency, impact scope. Okay, potentially you can add other fields in there as well that are relevant for you within your organization. And then what we're going to do is create that report, but we're also going to create an AI risk score. All right, so typical risk analysis, there's probably someone or there's some criteria, and I know there's an absolutely amazing studio app that can be used for generating risk scores based on criteria within an organization. But this way is a way to have AI suggest its version of a risk score to help with making a decision. All right, so let's run the demo and show you what that looks like. Okay, in this case, right, we've got our change record. We're going to do an update to the antivirus client. Hopefully it wasn't a CrowdStrike update that was being applied. And we're going to see we've got some of the various fields populated. You can see we've got a risk analysis and a risk score that are both blank there. And you can see some of the other data we've got in the system, service, urgency, impact, etc. within the system. All right, and all nice and empty. Now at the top, we've got our risk analysis custom action that we've done there. So we click that obviously would trigger an update. Now, because Aviator runs as a background action, most of the time you're likely to need to do a refresh for it to appear. And in this case, obviously we had to, but as you can see here, it's now filled out that risk analysis, allowing you to do that bit of a tidy up, maybe to then send it to someone else. As the one thing that we need to look at is how we can improve the way we do the responsing with some formatting in there. But that's common for any large language model. But hopefully that helps give you an idea. You can then see all the details, security risks, impacts of data loss, technical risks, incompatibility, and obviously recommendations put forward to potentially help reduce the risk overall around this one. And the good thing is again, we've got that AI risk score that puts in there. And one of the things I think that's really powerful with this kind of setup is if you're basing it on obviously the data that's being entered by the users, you're then going to have Aviator respond with an appropriate risk score that's always going to be consistent in the way that it's looking at that risk, but looking at the data that you've got within a ticket. Whereas as an individual, we sometimes bring our bias into those situations. So how was this one built? So again, we'll go through the same process. So first of all, we created a risk analysis Aviator model. Okay, so fairly simple. Analyze the text within the rest, the context and the input, and provide a detailed risk analysis. Now, we didn't put much in this, and I must admit, we were quite surprised when we first did this with our current large language model on the quality of the output. And we've certainly been doing some tests with some of the other large language models out there, and definitely with our updates we've planned, I think the quality is going to get even better on this, which is brilliant. So the next thing that we did is we created a risk score Aviator model. So this one, a little bit more complex, but as you can see, I've kind of made it a bit bigger so you could see everything that was in the prompt template. What we've done here is we said, analyze the same text or whatever's within the reference, so that's the context and the input again, and provide a single numerical risk score and nothing else using the following risk criteria. So we said 0 if there's no risk, 1 if it's low, 2 moderate, 3 high, 4 very high. So that gives you an idea on our grading that we did for that. And then we said, obviously provide. So this was where we were playing around with the template to try and get it to be very restrictive in how it responds back. Those that know a lot of the commercial large language models, they can be very chatty. You have to be very, should we say, specific in getting it to reduce or be specific in its response back to you. And again, you'll see here, we also set the max new tokens to 30. So also to make sure that the response was very light in its return. So next we need to set up the fields. So we set up the risk score field for the change. So we got that in there. We also set up the risk analysis score as well. So you've got that in the system. And then we created our custom action. Okay, so as is always the way, we created our custom action, just like you would create custom actions anywhere else. We showed it in primary, on the grid page, on the record page. So if you wanted to, as a change management person, you could trigger this as part of the grid. So click it on a few various things and then wait for the results to come back. Then from a point of view of the business rules, we've just created a couple of business rules based off that custom action. So the first one here is setting the risk analysis, so setting that text based on, and as you can see here, it's a concatenation of all those various fields that we pulled in. So we pulled in affected service, actual service, urgency, we pulled in impact scope, service downtime as well. But you could extend that and put anything else, and obviously description in there as well. And then using the risk analysis Aviator model to populate that nice rich text answer that we got. And then set the risk score, exactly the same thing. We see exactly the same input context, okay? Exactly the same input context. And we set the, but this time we're using the change risk score Aviator model to populate that numerical value. And again, that allows you then, if you wanted to trigger additional functions. I'd certainly think from a risk analysis perspective, if something was coming out as high, you probably want to react on that, maybe some emails that go to a business user, or maybe revert the change back to a draft form or something to have someone revalidate it or to reduce the risk scope before proceeding and going forward. But okay, that all depends on how your environment and how you want to work. All right, so I've talked quite a bit. We're almost at the top of the hour, and those were the Aviator setups that I wanted to do. So I hope you found this really useful, give you a good insight into the potential options around studio configurability with AI enriched workflows. I thought I'd share this screen here about all the existing use cases for AI we have within the product. I think a lot of people forget actually how much AI capability we have. And all the, should we say, the blue ones that are listed here are all part of Aviator and what we're doing with Aviator. And I guess I'm just going to throw that out there. You know, what can you create? One of the things that I'm really interested to see is other examples of AI enriched workflows that people do. So I would love for you to have a go. If you want access to trials, we can get you access to a trial system. Just reach out to us. And we'd love to see some good examples. And who knows, we may decide to add them into the out of the box or a version of them into the out of the box in a future session. And if you would like to showcase what you've done as an Aviator business rule or workflow, we'd love to have that as part of the user group as well. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Just as a final wrap up for today, just as a reminder, if you haven't and you hadn't come to this before, make sure to check the registration page, so the tiny.cc SMAX UG, for the upcoming sessions, because those are ones that you're going to need to make sure you've validated to get your messages for, going forward. Next, we've kind of moved to a monthly schedule as we go through the summer, mainly because to accommodate with everything that's going on. We know a lot of people aren't around. So next session will be August the 7th. Obviously we're going to do some latest news and announcements, the usual updates that we tend to do. Plus we'll treat it as probably treat that as an office hours as well. So any questions you got, maybe you started to have a play with Aviator workflows and you want to come back. That'd be really good to see. September the 4th, we're going to do some news announcements, but we're also going to talk about some planned changes for the SMAX User Group as we go forward. So general feedback we got is WebEx hasn't been that great as a platform, and we're looking at a few alternatives right now. We may be moving to Teams. We'll see as we go forward, but it'll be something that we'll talk about as part of that session, and be able to give you an update there. And then October the 2nd, we've got something that's happening at the end of September, and there'll be some announcements from a marketing perspective going out later in the next month or so. But in October, we'll be coming back for our SMAX 24.4 release readiness. That's our big major release, final release of the year. That'll obviously be available as of that week of October. And for you to watch it, and we'll be showcasing all the new and wonderful features as part of SMAX 24.4. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to me today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking about it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.